There's a place on this planet where scientists run out of answers. And I'm heading straight into it. The locals here refuse to even spee the name of this hole. I needed to understand why. 14 centuries ago, someone described exactly what's down there, without ever going in. The first team to reach the bottom found 0 human traces. In millions of years. Not one. Science finally made it down. But the question no one answers is, why did no one come back before?
In the heart of one of the most inhospitable deserts on the planet, there exists a hole that swallows light. It's not an ordinary cave. It's not a geological formation that school textbooks can explain. It's a circular abyss 30 meters in diameter, perfectly round, as if something had pierced the Earth's crust from above with surgical precision. The Bedouins who live in the region give it a wide berth. They don't talk about the place. They don't point in its direction. And when someone asks about the black hole in the middle of the sand, eyes look away and the conversation changes subject. For centuries, no human being dared to descend to the bottom, and when they finally did, what they found defies any simple explanation. The Barhout Well is located in eastern Yemen, 1,300 kilometers from the capital Sana'a, almost on the border with Oman. It's a region where almost no one lives, where the heat melts the notion of time, where roads disappear under dunes that the wind redesigns every night. And in the middle of this vastness of nothing, there exists this black eye staring at the sky. Sunlight doesn't penetrate beyond a few meters. The darkness inside seems denser than normal darkness, and a strange smell rises from the depths, an odor that local residents describe as the breath of something that shouldn't exist. When you look at the well from above, from a satellite or a drone, it looks like a wound on the desert's skin. A perfect circle of absolute blackness, surrounded by golden sand. There's nothing around it, no construction, no road, no sign that humans have ever tried to domesticate that piece of land. And when you approach the edge, the darkness stares back. It seems solid, it seems alive. And you understand why local residents prefer to pretend the place doesn't exist. Scientists have an explanation. They say it's a sinkhole, a natural formation created when underground rock layers collapse. They say it's 112 meters deep. They say the bottom expands to 120 meters wide, larger than the entrance, as if the well were a bottle turned upside down. They say there are 4 internal waterfalls fed by water that filters through porous rocks. They say the upper rock layer is 61 meters thick and permeable, allowing water to seep down to a less porous lower layer. And they say the bad smell comes from dead animals that have fallen in over the millennia, mainly birds that entered and couldn't get out. But scientists also admit they don't know when the well formed. They don't know why it's so perfectly circular. And they can't explain why, in millions of estimated years of existence, no historical record mentions any person who reached the bottom and returned to tell the story. Here begins the part that official reports prefer not to highlight. The Prophet Muhammad mentioned this place more than 1,400 years ago in a hadith preserved in Al-Mujam al-Kabir by Tabarani. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, he said that the best water on the face of the earth is the water of Zamzam in Mecca, which contains nourishment to satisfy hunger and cure for diseases. And the worst water on the face of the earth, he continued, is the water of Barhout, a valley in Hadramaut. Black and foul-smelling water that flows in the morning and disappears at night like locusts in flight. And you know what happened? For centuries, no one could verify if there was water down there. When they finally descended in 2021, they found waterfalls, water that appears and disappears according to the rock filtration cycle. Exactly as described 14 centuries ago by a man who never descended to the bottom of the well. Local residents have another name for the place. They call it the Pit of Hell. And it's not a poetic metaphor. It's not a colorful nickname that tourists invented. They believe, with the conviction of those who know something that science prefers to ignore, that this hole was created to imprison beings who should not walk free on the Earth's surface, beings called jinns. In Islamic tradition, jinns are one of the three classes of intelligent beings created by God. Angels were made from pure light, humans from clay and blood, and jinns from smokeless fire, a flame that produces no visible residue. The Quran mentions that they existed on earth long before Adam set foot in the garden. They had kings who commanded armies, prophets who brought messages, religions that competed for followers, and laws that governed entire civilizations. But many became corrupted. They filled the world with chaos and violence, and God sent armies of angels to punish them, sweeping them from the surface like plagues. Local legends say that Barhout is where the worst ones were thrown, an eternal prison carved in stone, a bottomless hole for creatures without redemption, and the smell that rises from there. It's the breath of these prisoners waiting, breathing, counting the centuries until the day the chains break. One of the stories circulating in the region tells that an ancient king of the Himyarites, a civilization that dominated Yemen before Islam, forced the jinns themselves to dig this well, not to imprison them, at least not initially. The king wanted to hide a treasure so valuable that no human would be capable of protecting it. Enough gold to buy kingdoms, jewels that glowed with their own light, artifacts of power that no mortal should possess. And the king knew that jinns were the only beings capable of digging a prison so deep that not even they themselves could escape after being thrown inside. And so it was done. The jinns dug their own cage, meter after meter of solid rock pierced by claws of fire. And when they finished, the king betrayed them. He threw them into the hole along with the treasure, sealed the entrance with enchantments, and left the eternal guardians watching over the wealth that would never again be touched by human hands. Another version of the story is even more disturbing. They say the well was not created by anyone. It always existed, since before humans, since before jinns, since before time itself had meaning. It is one of the portals that connects our world to the invisible world, Al-Ghaib, the dimension where beings dwell that our eyes were not made to see. And the jinns are not trapped inside. They come and go at will. The well is just a crossing point, a revolving door between realities, and anyone who descends will meet them on the way. Medieval Islamic scholars took these stories seriously. Al-Qazwini, a 13th century cosmographer, wrote in his treatise Wonders of Things Created that specific jinns inhabit Yemen and the coastal regions of Egypt. Beings called Gadar, who lure victims toward themselves and then attack them in ways that range from terror to murder. Beings that can thicken their constitutions and assume corporeal forms when they want to be seen. Beings that change form like humans, change clothes. And some of these jinns, according to Al-Qazwini, are so ancient they remember the time when the earth was theirs. And here comes the most unsettling part. Salah Babhaya is the Director General of the Geological Survey and Mineral Resources Authority of Al-Mahra province, a scientist, a government official, a man of data, measurements, and technical reports. And in June 2021, he publicly admitted that Yemeni authorities don't know what exists at the bottom of the Barhout well. He said that teams tried to descend and reached 50 or 60 meters deep. And then they stopped because oxygen decreased dangerously, because there was no ventilation, and because, in his words, they noticed strange things down there. They sensed a rare aroma, and the situation was, he used exactly this word, mysterious. Think about that for a moment. The official director of geological research for an entire region uses the word mysterious to describe a natural formation, says his team noticed strange things, and admits they never managed to reach the bottom. This is not the discourse of someone who has all the answers. It's the discourse of someone who found something they can't classify in standard forms. Local residents have even more stories to tell. They say that objects left near the edge are sucked into the hole, as if an invisible force were pulling them. That cameras sent to film the interior simply stop working when they reach a certain depth. That people who talk about the well out loud start having bad luck, accidents, illnesses, inexplicable losses. That voices and screams rise from the depths at night, as if there were people down there calling for help or for company. And that anyone brave or foolish enough to descend will have their head ripped off by the jinns that inhabit the darkness. And then, in September 2021, a group of speleologists from Oman decided to do what no one had done before in documented form. The Oman Cave Exploration Team, known by the acronym OSET, gathered 10 experienced explorers and traveled to the Al-Mara Desert. Mohammed Al-Kindi, a geology professor at the German University of Technology in Oman, led the group. He knew the legends. He had heard the warnings from local residents. He knew they were risking their heads, literally, if the stories were true, and he decided to descend anyway. "Passion drove us to do this," he said afterward. "We felt this would reveal a new wonder and a part of Yemen's history." 8 of the 10 explorers descended using a pulley and rope system. 2 remained on the surface managing the equipment. And as the cables lowered them through the darkness, something surprising happened. A crowd of 80 local residents appeared out of nowhere. They came out of distant villages, crossed the desert, not to watch with curiosity, to warn. They shouted about demons, about air that couldn't be breathed, about voices in the depths that called the names of those descending, and about the inevitable fate of anyone who defied the pit of hell. Al-Kindi descended anyway. He spent 6 hours at the bottom, explored every corner he could reach, and when he returned to the surface, his head was still firmly attached to his neck. The jinns had not fulfilled their promise, but what he found down there was not exactly what science expected. The bottom of the well revealed a complete ecosystem. Waterfalls of crystalline water falling from cracks in the walls at 65 meters deep, each 46 meters high. Stalagmites up to 9 meters tall, growing from the floor, formed over millennia by constant dripping of minerals. Cave pearls scattered across the irregular floor, rare calcium carbonate formations that glow in shades of lime green and gray when light hits them, snakes slithering among the rocks, frogs jumping near the pools, beetles hidden in the crevices, and remains of dead animals, mainly birds, which probably explained part of the bad smell that rose to the surface. Al-Kindi drank the water. He filled an entire bottle and drank without hesitation. He took samples for analysis at university laboratories in Oman, and he discovered it was fresh water, completely normal, drinkable without any treatment. No poison, no toxic substance, no sign of supernatural contamination. The worst water on the face of the earth, according to the Prophet's hadith, was safe to drink. When Al-Kindi emerged and showed photos to the residents who had come to warn of his certain death, something changed in the dynamic. They approached instead of retreating. They asked questions instead of curses. They touched the rock and water samples with curiosity instead of fear. And some seemed relieved. The professor said afterward that he felt he had changed people's minds, at least about that specific place. But there was one detail that went unnoticed in most international reports. Al-Kindi found no human footprints at the bottom, no sign that any person had been there before, no ancient tool marks, no fragment of rope left by past expeditions, no bones of explorers who didn't return. In millions of estimated years of existence, in centuries of human civilization flourishing in the region, with empires rising and falling around it, no one had reached the bottom and left a trace. The legends spoke of expeditions that never returned, of people who descended and disappeared into the darkness, and the bottom was completely untouched. There are 2 ways to interpret this. The first is the rational explanation. The well was simply inaccessible with the technology available before modern times. Natural fiber ropes were not long or resistant enough. Oxygen decreased to the point of causing fainting, and people gave up before reaching the bottom or died trying, with their bodies remaining at some intermediate point that the modern expedition didn't examine in detail. Simple as that. The second interpretation is more disturbing. If people descended over the centuries and never returned, where are the bodies? Al-Kindi found animal remains, mainly birds, decomposing carcasses that explained the smell, but no human bones, no ancient skull, no fragment of fabric from centuries-old clothing, no artifact from past expeditions. Either no one ever really tried to descend, which contradicts the local stories passed down through generations, or those who tried were removed from there, taken somewhere else. By whom? To where? Why? There's yet another detail that Al-Kindi mentioned in interviews, but that is rarely highlighted in headlines. He said that one of his biggest concerns when descending was not the jinns, or the low oxygen, or the snakes. It was the possibility of finding unexploded ordnance. Yemen has been in civil war since 2014. Pilots sometimes drop bombs on caves because civilians hide in them during attacks. And Al-Kindi didn't know what he might find in the depths of a hole that no one had explored in modern times. Think about what this means. A country devastated by a war that has lasted more than a decade. A remote region where the government can barely maintain a presence. A hole that locals have avoided for centuries out of supernatural fear. And the real possibility that someone dumped explosives, weapons, or anything else they didn't want, found. What else could have been discarded there? What else could be hidden in a place that everyone is afraid to visit? And here we arrive at the part that no one can really explain. Al-Kindi is a scientist, a geologist with decades of experience, a man who spent his life measuring rocks, analyzing formations and writing academic papers. And after descending to the bottom of the pit of hell, he said something that doesn't fit the standard scientific discourse. He said he believes the name Barhout doesn't refer only to this specific well. It's a legendary name, attributed to various caves and formations in Yemen over the centuries. And that he plans to visit other similar formations in the Hadramaut region to investigate whether any of them could be the true pit of hell mentioned in ancient texts. In other words, even after descending to the bottom and not finding jinns, Al-Kindi is not convinced he found the right place. He thinks the true pit of hell, the one mentioned by the prophet, the one feared for generations, may be somewhere else, still unexplored, still undocumented, still keeping its secrets in the darkness. Medieval Arab science treated jinns as facts, not as superstition. Al-Ghazwini described entire categories of these creatures in his cosmographic treatise. There are the Ifrit, the most powerful and proud, the Marid, associated with water and the oceans, the Shaitan, eternally allied with Iblis, the devil, and common jinns, who can be good or evil depending on their choices, exactly like humans. If jinns are just superstition, why do so many different cultures, in so many different places, describe beings with such similar characteristics? The genies of the 1001 Nights who grant wishes, the demons of the Testament of Solomon who were enslaved to build the temple, the spirits of Persian Zoroastrianism who ascend to the heavens to spy on divine secrets, the fairies of Celtic tradition who live in hollow hills and steal children, the yokai of Japan who inhabit places that humans avoid. All these traditions speak of invisible beings who share the world with us, who have their own agenda, who can help or destroy, and who prefer dark, isolated underground places, far from human eyes, places exactly like the Barhout well. The war in Yemen has made the region practically inaccessible to anyone who is not local or military. Since 2014, the conflict between the internationally recognized government and Houthi rebels has killed tens of thousands of people. Millions have been displaced from their homes. Two-thirds of the country's 30 million inhabitants depend on some form of humanitarian aid. The United Nations classifies the situation as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And traveling to the eastern part of the country, where the well is located, is considered extremely dangerous by practically all international security agencies. This means that for now, the pit of hell will continue to be what it has always been: a mystery, a place that most people in the world will never be able to visit. A hole in the desert about which we only have the words of a handful of explorers, brave or foolish enough to descend, and perhaps that's how it should be. Because there's a third possibility that no one mentions out loud. What if the jinns didn't leave because they don't want us to know they're there? What if they simply hid when the explorers descended, retreating to deeper chambers that humans haven't yet found? What if the well is exactly what the legends have always said, a prison for beings who should not walk free, and the 2021 expedition simply didn't descend deep enough, didn't stay long enough, didn't look in the right corners to find them? Al-Kindi spent 6 hours at the bottom, in a place that has existed for millions of years. 6 hours is a blink of an eye. It's like entering a forest for 5 minutes and concluding that no animals exist because you didn't see any while making noise with your footsteps. The Prophet's hadith mentions something curious that no one has been able to explain. He said that the water of Barhout flows in the morning and disappears at night. The explorers descended during the day, collected water during the day, took photos during the day, and ascended well before nightfall. No one stayed to see what happens when the sun sets over the desert and the darkness of the well connects with the darkness of the sky. Local residents don't visit the well at night. They don't approach the edge after the stars appear. They don't look in its direction when the moon is high. And when asked why, they say only that some questions shouldn't be asked, that some answers cost more than they're worth. Science wants us to believe that the Barhout well is just a sinkhole, an interesting geological formation for academic papers, but perfectly natural. An accident of erosion and underground cave collapse that happened at some point in the last few million years and has no meaning beyond what our instruments can measure. But science also admits it doesn't know when the well formed, doesn't know why it's so perfectly circular when most sinkholes have irregular shapes, doesn't know why local authorities, before the 2021 expedition, had never managed to reach the bottom despite documented attempts, and can't explain how the Prophet Muhammad, 14 centuries ago, described specific characteristics of the well that have only now been confirmed. Perhaps there are things that science simply wasn't made to explain, phenomena that don't fit into formulas, realities that resist measurement, truths that can only be known by those who have the courage to descend into the darkness and ask directly. The Barhout well remains there, in the middle of the desert, far from any paved road, surrounded by a war that seems to have no end, and protected by legends that have survived empires, religions, invasions, and entire civilizations. The explorers came and left. They took their photos, collected their samples, wrote their reports in technical language, changed some minds, and the well remains exactly as it was before, exactly as it will be after. A black eye staring at the sky, breathing, waiting. And if someday you find yourself in the Al-Mahra desert and smell a strange odor on the wind, an odor that belongs to no animal you know, perhaps it's better not to investigate. Perhaps it's better to do as the Bedouins have done for centuries, and will continue to do for centuries more. Look away, change the subject, quicken your pace, and keep walking without looking back. Because some questions really shouldn't be asked, some doors shouldn't be opened, and some depths shouldn't be explored.